I'm interested in where you're coming from, what your story is, and where we go about helping young people
Mm.
to know that they can thrive really in these times that are so uncertain. Yeah.
Absolutely. Where I really wanted to start from is a little bit about me, because I think it sets a little bit of a platform about who I am and why is it that I'm here today. My name is Michele. I was born in Gibraltar, which is the south of Spain, and I had a fantastic childhood. Actually, I had a wonderful. Looking back at my early years, had a fantastic family, a very very close, large family. So my early years of feeling a little bit shaky wasn't really around the family situation, was really around school. So very, very early on in school, it was very easy to see that I wasn't really a high achiever at all. I was often seen as a little bit spaced out, didn't really pay attention that well. I used to sit in the classroom staring out the window. I didn't have any problems with connecting with friends. I had a lot of friends, but I just couldn't do it in school. Literacy, numeracy, geography, history, I just saw myself as not capable of doing that. And the teachers kept reminding me how not capable of all of that I was. So I think it was about the age of 4. I think one of my reception teachers, I'll never forget, turned around and told me that I would never make anything of myself. And that thought and that conversation stayed with me for a long, and we're talking 40, 50, I'm 51 now. And it stayed with me for about 40 years. Just that was that thought that I constantly had, I'm never going to make anything of myself. And so it's important to look at sometimes those early messages that we get, that we integrate into our being and make it as part of us, really, which it never really was. But aside from that, what I noticed as a child was that although I had a lot of friends in school, I wasn't a high achiever, but I would notice the kids in the classroom or the kids in school that were, I guess, in the periphery, like they kind of didn't really belong, or they were a bit on the outskirts, and they didn't really have that many friends, or they just struggled in a different way to me. They just kind of didn't fit in. And I would spend time away from my friends, just spending time with these kids, just sitting with them and making them feel like they were valued, like they mattered, like they were important. It was it was something that was always inside of me to make sure people knew that they matter, that they they're not to be ignored. Probably because I had a huge issue with that, and I saw it so clearly in someone else. So I always used to pinpoint people in school that were a little bit on the outside of it and sit with them. And I noticed that even when I was outside school, and for example, my parents would take us away on holiday, and we'd go to a hotel, for example, and if I saw someone by themselves, I'd want to veer over to them and have a conversation. And I was quite young. I have a conversation. I didn't want them to be alone, and I want them to feel that they mattered. And all the way through my life, through jobs, through all of that was always a theme, but I actually never knew that I could make a career out of that. It was like, that was just kind of something I did. I just, if we had a decorator at my parents' house painting and he was on his own, I'd sit next to him and talk to him and him talk to me, and we would have a conversation. And I was really, really young then. And it was always about that. It was, I think what's important for young people who are watching is that sometimes you are so engrossed in looking at, what's my thing? What's this thing that's going to make me? What's this profession that I need to run towards? What are these exams that I need to do that's going to take me somewhere? Because essentially, it might already be, it is already in there. If you slow down and really home in on all those things that you so naturally were good at, it's there. It's waiting for you. Those signs are there, but you're too busy, perhaps, because I know I was too busy. Even further on in school, because I wasn't, I wasn't great at all these subjects academically. My saving grace was dance, drama. Well, the minute I found ballet, modern dance, all of these things, it was like it was my savior. Okay, I wasn't intelligent, but I could dance, and I loved it. I used to go on auditions. I remember queuing up for auditions as a young child. I didn't even wait for my parents to take me. I used to go myself, and I loved it. And I loved being on stage. The minute I stepped on stage, I was out there. And it's really interesting because later on in my life, when I wanted to do public speaking, as I became a coach, I would tell myself, but I can't do public speaking because it means I have to be intelligent. It means I have to have something intelligent to say. It means that my English, which is my second language, has to be perfect. I have to make sense of it. And what I realized once that thought, because these are all thoughts passing by, once that thought shifted, I realized that actually where I felt most comfortable was always on stage. So who cares if I'm talking or who cares if I'm dancing? It's kind of, I'm still making a difference somehow. So again, those little early clues were there staring at me in the face while I run like a marathon runner towards the next thing and the next thing and the next thing that was going to give me this sense of belonging and these answers. But actually the answers were always inside. That's something to remember, that often we're so involved in the exam taking, in the A levels, GCSEs, do I have a degree? We're so involved in all of that, that gives us a sense of self. Okay, I pass these exams, I got an A star, or I got a B, or I got a C. That makes me who I am. When we eliminate all of that nonsense, because that's how I feel about a lot of the time, it's nonsense. When you take all of that away and you look in, you might be staring exactly at what you need to be doing. And once you find it, it's amazing, because that's where you always need to have been doing, really. But it's a journey within. It's a journey within, and often you have to do without when you go within. That was my example, is to skim away all that wasn't working in order to reveal the truth of who I am. And so that was very much my early years. And then teenage years were spent doing, sort of dance classes, dance shows. I loved it. I loved being a teenager. But again, I never saw myself as somebody who could do a degree, who could go on and perhaps become a lawyer, a journalist, a doctor. I saw myself, and no disrespect to this, but I saw myself as perhaps doing a hairdressing course, perhaps doing a beauty course, perhaps doing something that didn't require a lot of academic study in terms of going to university. And I just never knew, and sometimes there's been that issue of me of thinking, well, if I would have known that I was totally capable, who would I have become then? Would I have chosen to become a lawyer and known that I could totally do it? Or a doctor, or whatever. But I told myself I couldn't. And that was all coming from me. I told myself something early on that was not true. And then I lived my life through it for the longest time. At the age of 18, I went to live in Israel. I actually only went for a 2-week holiday. That's all I went, for a 2-week holiday. A year later, I was still there. That was, if I can think about any part of my life that I've been the happiest, really, was there. Because it was for the first time in my life, excuse me, that I didn't have a label. So usually in my hometown, in Gibraltar, I was the daughter of so-and-so, the sister of so-and-so. I always had to please and make sure that I was doing the right thing, the proper thing. That was how I lived. So I couldn't exactly be too unleashed. And the minute I got to Israel, I was just anonymous. I could be who I wanted to be. I was 18. I arrived there and I have never experienced a freedom like it. It was just amazing. People that I was meeting, I could become who I wanted to become, do what I wanted to do. Ended up going on kibbutz and absolutely loved it. I had no makeup on for the year. I had no jewelry. I looked like nothing on earth, and I had never been happier. I'd never been happy. I was working the fields, milking the cows. I remember once walking on kibbutz on a very early morning. We'd just been picking pomegranates, and it was early morning. And I was walking through this beautiful field, and alongside me, it was like the Jordan Valley. So it was this beautiful, and alongside me were these lakes. And I remember, I think that's probably the first time in my kind of adult life that I felt this true sense of connection. I suddenly felt this beautiful view in front of me not having anything particularly going on. I was just walking. And I suddenly felt this kind of connection of joy, like I probably hadn't felt since I was a young child. Joy with no filters, with no thinking. It was like totally unfiltered. It was unbelievably pure, and it was beautiful. And it lasted for a few moments. And I felt glimpses of it throughout my life after that, but they're little glimpses of it. And I just felt this pure joy. And again, I had nothing there to say. It's not like I was super wealthy. It's not that I was wearing beautiful outfits. It's not that I was invited to the best parties. I was on kibbutz. But I had this unbelievable joy. It was probably the happiest time of my life. And then a short while after that, the war, the Gulf War broke out. And they started to hand out gas masks and what have you. And I thought, well, you know what? I think I'm going to go to England for maybe 6 months. And then I'll go back. I'll go back to Israel. So my plan was to come to Israel to England for 6 months. 30 years later, I'm still here. So I never left because I stayed and things kind of worked out. And I thought, well, look, this kind of is working. So I'm going to hang out here. So I got a job. What I noticed again was even when I had jobs, I was never content with that job. I would always look towards, okay, how can I be promoted? How could I possibly do extra so I can go to the next department? What courses did I need to do? I was never fully present with where I was at. I was always looking for the next best thing. So although my time in Israel was amazing, the moment I came into England, I came into the whole vibe that there was here of doing more, being more, achieving, getting qualification, getting a profession. So I got sucked into this, or I sucked myself into it. And I was like a marathon runner. I was literally like or maybe like in a relay race, even where you have to jump off hurdles. I would like go through one hurdle and then I'd look for the next, and then I'd look for the next. And it always felt like at the end of all these hurdles, there would be this huge banner saying, Michele, you've arrived. You belong. You've got happiness. You've got success. You've got everything. It was kind of a destination I was running towards. It was like, well, I need to get there. I need to get there. But I didn't really know what getting there kind of meant. But why there was better than here? What was I going to have there that I couldn't have here? And could I make the here better? What would I need to do in order to be in that space? So, but, I was still running. And again, what I noticed at work was, I hated my job. It was in finance, totally not what I wanted to do. But the one thing that I had going on was that I had this huge filing room. I was in my early 20s. I was the youngest in the department. I had this big filing room that I used to have to file once a week. And when the workers would walk through the filing room to get to their office, they would stop, sit on a stool, and start to tell me their problems. Because I'd say to them, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? And they say, well, you don't know what's happened. They said, I was the first one to know, who was having an affair with whose marriage was a little bit rocky, who wanted to leave their job. People would sit, so much so that some of the people in the department and in the organization actually began to call that room Michele's therapy room. But again, I hadn't quite got it. That this is what I needed to be doing. that working with people was kind of my thing, I didn't. So I still kept searching. I then went to work in another organization that was also based around finance and had the same thing going on. People would come to me with their problems. And that's the only part of working there that I loved, was the connection, the talking with people, the listening to their problems, making them feel not acknowledged, heard, important, valued. That is so important to me. And then just after that, I got married, started to have kids. And very soon after, I think my eldest was 2.5 years old and my youngest was 3 months old. The wool got pulled, the carpet got pulled from under my feet, basically. And I ended up a single mom. And I remember at that time, I just turned 30. And I remember staring out of the window in my garden and thinking, how am I going to do this? It's not like I can pop around to my parents or to my parents still live in Gibraltar. My family was there. How am I going to do this? How am I going to bring up 2 kids by myself? I have no idea how to do this. So I just did what intuitively felt right. And that was to love them and to spend time with them, to do fun things with them. It was tough. It was really, really tough. I mean, I come from a community that is predominantly married. My culture, my religion, it's very much what it's about. That's how you belong. That's how you're part of things. You're part of a partnership and you have kids. You do it as a family. You don't do it as a single mom. But one of the things that I really was always insistent on was that I was not going to be looked down upon, that people weren't going to be pity. I didn't want a pity party from people. I wanted to feel like an empowered woman, that somebody that was as worthy as all those couples that we got together with the kids. And that took a lot of work for me, took a lot of work. So I began to do personal development workshops in my spare time. I was working 3 jobs. I was working, I was bringing up my kids by myself, and I began to do personal development and I realized how much I loved it. And I began to facilitate other people. And I remember I was facilitating this guy who was having this huge, big moment. And he turned around and he said to me, "You need to be a therapist." I said, "What?" He said, yeah, you need to be a therapist. I said, "Yeah, but that requires study. I can't study. I can't do study. I'm not intelligent. I'm not academic." He said, no, you need to do it. And what he said, that whole moment really impacted me enough that I thought, well, why don't I try it out? And I went and I searched further and I went into a psychotherapy course. And what I noticed was that I would get the first in all the essays. I was like the class representative. I was always the first to hand it in. It was always great work from my lecturers. And I remember saying I think one of the lecturers said to me, "Wow, Michele, you really put this amazing theoretical piece together. That's amazing." And I remember staring at him and thinking, this is the first time that I've ever been acknowledged academically. This is the first time that I see myself as somebody who is worthy of that can do it. And that really, honestly, I will thank those lecturers that were there who were so holding and so gave me such incredible confidence and telling me that I could do it. I could really do this. And I finished my course, and immediately I had a job as a project managing therapy services for child and family in schools. And I loved working with kids. And in a way, working with kids and giving them a voice was almost the way that I was working through me not having had much of a voice as a child. And I wanted to give these kids the opportunity. And I worked with kids who were abused, in poverty, refugees, unbelievable issues like you'll never believe. Child protection. I mean, I was constantly reporting people for child protection issues. But amazing, amazing work. And I loved it. I worked there for about 7 years. And I worked with the parents as well. So I worked with the parents, the kids. It's just amazing work. It was amazing, amazing work. And I thought, well, how about I set up my own therapy business? Why not? I can set up my own practice. So I left the place to be, which is what it was called. And I set up my own clinic. And I started to see clients that were, sort of addicts who were suicidal, who were depressed. Interestingly enough, I had a couple of kids, not kids, I had a couple of teenagers coming to see me by their parents. And what was interesting is that I was in a very affluent clinic, very different to where I'd worked before. Very, very affluent area. And the interesting thing was that the kids that were brought to me came from very, very wealthy families. Had it all. I mean, literally had it all. Had unbelievable. But what I found really interesting was that the self-esteem of those kids was actually no different to the kids that I'd worked with when I worked at the place to be, where they were at the poverty level. So I found that a really, really interesting notice, that actually poverty or wealth was neither here nor there, actually. Because what these kids really wanted more than anything was connection, a sense of belonging, a sense of worth, being acknowledged, being noticed, love. That's really, I don't care how much money they had or didn't have. On both sides, they wanted that. And that was where the first seeds of, maybe it's not the money. Maybe it's not out there. Kind of that's that's when things started to change for me. But even more so is that by then I had got remarried, and life was tough. Life was really, really tough. I ended up getting divorced for the second time while I was a psychotherapist, having my own clinic. I think I probably had worse problems than my own clients had. And I'd still sit down and listen to them, which was ridiculous, actually. But when my second divorce, my first divorce, I rebuilt, I bounced back somehow with the love of my kids, with all of that. I bounced back somehow. I don't even know how I did it. I bounced back. Second time round, it was so much harder. And I knew so much more. I'd been in therapy for 10 years. I was a therapist. I'd worked with this stuff, but it didn't make the slightest bit of difference. I was going through a pretty difficult time. And what was really interesting about that time is that more than the first time around that I got divorced is that I lost everything that I believed had defined me. So I thought I was defined by the marriage, the profession, the kids, having a really nice house, having a great car, having status in my community. I thought I was defined by all of that. But as I left my husband and took my daughters with me, each of those things dropped away. Each of those things dropped away. And I was left with nothing. And that's where I began to get curious. If I'm not defined by all these things, if security isn't in all these things, then where is it? And how can I find it? What's the point? How can I find it? And it was interesting because we were staying at a relative's place for the time because we didn't have where to live. And the television came on and there was this news flash of this huge hurricane that happened in the US. I was watching it and I was watching this unfold. And one of the journalists came up to this man who was watching all his belongings, all his home fall to the ground. He was just staring at it. And I remember the journalist went up to him and said, "What are you going to do now? Like, you've got nothing." And this man said to him, "I'll rebuild. I'll rebuild. I've got my wife and kids. I'll rebuild." And then this journalist asked him another question. He asked, but aren't you worried about security? And this guy turned around and he said, security is where I am. And this was from a guy who just had his home completely fall to the ground. This was something I was watching. And this guy never knew that this had a huge impact on my life, hearing those words. Because I thought, if the security is not in his home, actually it's in him, then it's in me too. It's in me too. And I'm going to rebuild from that platform, knowing that I'm okay already. That you have everything you need already to take you where you want to go, or to just keep you exactly where you are. It doesn't matter what. In rebuilding and in sort of bouncing back, I bounced back all over the place, like a bouncing ball. It was painful. It was difficult. I'm not even going to deny that. But the pain's not going to kill you. The pain's not going to do anything other than heal. It's a healing process. That's all it really is. It's an actual healing process. So that was my process of rebuilding from scratch, and just touching inside and seeing, okay, what do I need to do next? And I found things inside me that I never knew existed. I never knew I could be a writer. I never knew I could be a public speaker, ever. I never, ever knew that. Never knew I could be coaching some great clients. I just never knew that I could even survive this. But I could, and I did. Because often we don't, I think we often look at life as something that needs to be kept very, very safe. I took some huge risks along my life. And it's taken me to where I am now. I guess if I would have had the family background, or, the family situation that I wanted 20 years ago, which didn't work out, I wouldn't be where I am today, because I wouldn't have had the excuse to have to go deeply in. I would never have had to. I didn't have any other way or any other direction but to go in. And in a way, that's how things have evolved, is rebuilding one brick at a time, putting brick, cement, but from a much more solid ground. So I'm aware I've been talking for a long time, but you haven't asked me any questions. So I'm wondering, Anne, if there's any questions you have or anything you want to comment on.
So your understanding of, I had the same experience of being a psychotherapist for years, and specifically a sexual and relationship therapist. And I also had the same experience of being divorced twice.
Yes, I know you do. That's why I enjoyed your
yeah, that's why and obviously something was missing in what I'd learned and so on. And I didn't discover what it was until I came across the three principles, and the three principles understanding, and the understanding that, as you said, we have everything inside of us already that we need. And I was doing exactly the same as you, thinking it was outside of me, and I have to achieve this, and I have to achieve that, and eventually I will find what I'm looking for. When actually, eventually, after a long time, and that's why we're sharing this now, is so that hopefully people in their teens and 20s are going out in life knowing this from the beginning, that they don't have to be looking for something outside of themselves, that they can find something that, if they start to listen, like you said, you already knew that you were good at listening to people, that was your. And that's not going to be the same for everyone. That's not going to be what we're not trying to encourage everyone to be therapists and to listen to, and so on. But that we do have an inner message. And unfortunately, our school system up till now, at least, has been like your teacher saying, oh, you're not going to make, but how does your teacher know your teachers don't know what's inside of you. They don't know who you really are inside. They're talking about what they've been taught about how we should do things and how things should happen and how this should happen. But that's not the truth. The truth is that all of us already have everything that we need inside of us. And we also have access to that inner wisdom, that whatever you want to call it, that we all know that we get messages, and not messages even, but ideas out of the blue, and we have a feeling, we have that really good feeling with it, like you did, like you had that really, really good feeling when you were listening to people, but it was just came so naturally to you that it didn't occur to you that's and I've seen that in so many other people, in so many people who naturally are really good at things, and then they're trying to make themselves do something else because their parents think they should do something else, or their school thinks they should do something else, or this is the right thing to do to make money, or oh well, I wouldn't be able to make enough money doing that. But you do, if you follow that.
Yes, absolutely. And I love what you said. Absolutely. And I think for me, having come across the 3 principles was a huge saving grace for me, because I had been a therapist for so many years and I wasn't making any better decisions than I'd ever had made. And I also saw myself as even when I was giving my clients therapy, I saw them as broken. I saw them as fragmented. I saw them as needing to get somewhere. I needed to fix them somehow. And the moment I came up to this understanding, it totally shook my world. It totally made me see something so simple, but it slowed me down. I was like, as I said before, I was like a marathon runner, always running to the next thing. It was like, what's next? What's next? The minute I slowed down, what was interesting was I became more present. And in becoming more present, I became more focused. So basically there was no place to run to, because here was actually quite good. I was enjoying being here because I was so much more present. Everything came alive. I remember, after I went to my first 3 principles conference, I remember taking a walk in the park with my dog. And I'd done that in numerous occasions. And suddenly, like, the trees and the leaves on the trees were like a dynamic green. Now, they'd always been there, but I had always seen them kind of a mousy brown color and a dark, that I had never seen the dynamic, almost luminous green that was coming out from those leaves, because all those filters of thought came away. And in that, I was able to have a clear view of what life looked like. And it was far simpler than what I thought it was going to be. And more than anything was that knowing that I was complete already. I was okay already, but for my thinking that was telling me that I wasn't.
Right. Okay. So when you were, so going back over that, so now when you understood all of that, when you look back at being a child, and when you thought you weren't intelligent, as many children I'm sure do,
Yes,
and
that's
many
right.
children have been told that they're not, like, for example, Einstein. Einstein was told he wasn't intelligent when he was at school because he was very like you were. He was off in his daydreams and he was focusing on something else completely, not on what we're supposed to, apparently supposed to focus on when we're at school, and how he wasn't trying hard for his exams and he wasn't concentrating on those things because they weren't interesting to him. And so teachers said that he was not intelligent in the same way that they said you were not intelligent. But we all have. They didn't recognize, because that's the way they had been taught to, but they didn't recognize that we all have access to infinite wisdom. Wisdom, not the same thing as intelligence, much bigger than intelligence, because it's beyond what our mind can think. It's the bigger ideas, that everything that comes in. And it always amazes. I love watching, as I've said before, I love watching little children before they have all this, all the extra thought comes in, before they're taught to think, should I think this and should I do that and so on. When they're just completely spontaneous, they don't stop and think, oh, I'm not intelligent enough to have that idea. They just think, I'll do that. I'll do that. This is what I'll do next. They don't stop and think about it. And it's when we start to stop and get involved and take those thoughts seriously, it's like, we just don't have to take them seriously. That's and even when you were, it's interesting, isn't it? When you were naturally listening to people, you didn't know intellectually what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing, as you did after you did your psychotherapy course, but you were actually being more effective.
Yes, I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. So again, it's not that, I think everybody has their thing, or everybody has something that they haven't even noticed, but pick up on light bulb moments, those moments of intuition, that moment that there isn't any anxiety towards that decision or towards what you want to be doing. It just feels calm, and it just feels like, hey, why not? Let's see what I'm going to go with that because that kind of feels right. It's very different to the anxiety that I often used to live with, which is, I'm not going to be okay unless this is sorted out. You're okay already. And I wish I'd known this 30 years ago. But it's okay that I didn't know that, because I'm still okay, even despite not knowing that. I still bounced back, and I still survived it. And we all do. But I think my 20s, for example, I would have enjoyed far more, because I was like a woman in a mission. Oh, I need to do this. Now I need to do that. Now I need to do that. And I need to be married by a certain age. I need to start dating. I didn't enjoy any of that. I was in London for the first time, with a bunch of girls.
And we do all of those things because.
Yeah, exactly. We do it. Yeah. Sorry.
we think that's going to make us feel better, and this is going to make us feel better, or just the same as, I'll have a drink of alcohol because that'll make me feel better, or I'll smoke a cigarette because that'll make me feel better, or I'll eat this because that'll make me feel better, or I won't eat this because that'll make me feel better. And actually, it's not those things outside that can make us feel better at all. It's just, those are just the little thoughts in the head going, and it's not the thought, the feeling is there all the time. That's our natural state of being, and it's only the thoughts that are getting in the way of us feeling that in the first place.
Yes, and knowing we can't. I guess one of the things that I learned, and leaving therapy and going into coaching and going into the 3 principles, is that I don't need to make my feeling and my thought into a positive one. I don't need to do affirmations to make myself feel better. I can just surrender to it and know that it's going to give me perhaps a hard time for the next couple of hours, but at least it won't give me a hard time for the next couple of weeks or months. Because I find that once I surrender to it, the difficult thoughts, the difficult feelings, it's the intensity is kind of lowered, because I'm not resisting anything. There's no resistance there. Like, I'm just surrendering, and I'm meeting it as a friend, or as an annoying next door neighbor that's coming for the next half hour. I cannot wait till they leave. And that's often what I do with my clients, is that we create characters out of these thoughts. Sometimes those beliefs, those thoughts, we call them names, and we begin to see when they come in and see when they come out. We give them a little platform as if they were on stage. There's the actor needs to come on stage. The thought of I'm not good enough needs to go on stage for the next hour or two. And I'm going to leave it there for now. I'm going to let it have its moment. And then the spotlight needs to go somewhere else eventually. So that's very much how I see it, because we cannot start converting things or trying to always be positive. Sometimes the right thing to do is just to be sad with a situation, to feel angry with a situation, to feel disappointed. Sometimes that is, that is a natural way of being, and that might then take you somewhere else. Whereas people often feel, and I used to certainly, that we categorize feelings and thoughts into good ones and into bad ones. These are the good feelings, these are the good thoughts. I'm going to allow them in, and I'm going to be happy when they're here. These are the bad ones. I don't want them. They need to go away right now. And there's something wrong with me if I have them. So we start to categorize them. And what I also always do with my clients is, how can we make them neutral? How can we just see they're coming in, they're super annoying, they're not great to have. I know I still have them, but they're going to go. And sometimes happy ones will come, and sometimes sad ones, and sometimes disappointed ones, and sometimes they're coming in and out and in and out. And I get it that when there's difficult feelings, it's not pleasant. It's not nice. It feels yucky. You just want to run away as fast as you can from it.
But part of sometimes what I've noticed is that sometimes we want to run away from them because we think we shouldn't be having them. Whereas actually the feeling itself is something that we might actually pay to go and to have, like we'll go to the cinema, or we'll do something like we'll go to the cinema and pay to be made frightened,
yes,
or to be made sad, or to be made, we actually, and when we do that, when we feel sad or we feel frightened or we feel worked up about something when we're watching a film, that's okay. We don't think, oh, that's a bad feeling, I shouldn't be feeling it. And it's so why would we say that when we feel it any other time? It's only only a judgment thought saying, oh, I shouldn't be feeling that. We've been taught the little children who are running around and playing, and they don't think, I shouldn't be feeling that feeling, I shouldn't be feeling that. They just get on and feel whatever they're feeling.
They do, but very early on in their lives, and I saw it from my own kids, and when they were in school, is that you have parents saying, did you behave well today? Are you happy today? Mommy's happy today. Are you sad? Oh, don't be angry. You're not allowed to be angry. And so we have those messages that already categorize them into two different slots. The acceptable, so we edit, so then we start editing, and we start saying, as if when I'm writing an article, I have to edit what kind of doesn't need to be there. So we start to edit, I don't want that. And I remember one of the first coaching sessions that I had with a 3 principles practitioner. I think it was Shal Rosenblatt at the time. I think I was talking for like an hour, and he was anything, and then he turned around and he said just one sentence. He said, but it's not a monster. Your thought isn't a monster. Now that's super simplistic, but actually sometimes we see them as monsters and we feel like we need to defend against them. So then we go really tight in to defend them. No, go away, I can't. We feel paralyzed because our whole body goes into that. We feel paralyzed. Go away, you can't come in. It's too scary. The minute we let it in, it's like almost that kind of monster becomes disempowered, and it loses that huge energy that it had before. So I think Linda Pransky used to say, you go into feelings as if you go into rooms, you go into different rooms. And again, when you're looking at feelings, look at how you're editing them into good and bad slots. Even the kind of bad feelings might be the best thing going on for you. It might be communicating to you, because that always comes from a thought. That might be communicating something that you need to learn from something that's occurring right now. And by you pushing it away, you're saying it's wrong, go away. So allow it in like you allow everything else in, because it might have something to tell you.
Yes, and it still reminds me of Sid Banks as well, saying that if people were not afraid of their thoughts and their feelings, and I can't remember the exact words now, but if they were not, that would make such a difference in the world. If people were just not afraid of what they feel. If we weren't afraid of our feelings, just think of the difference that would make. And there's nothing to be afraid of, because a feeling is just a reflection of some thought that happens to be passing through in that moment. And that seems so simple, and yet it was such a big thing for me when I first learned it. Yeah. So how did you come across this understanding in the first place? Because you went from
Yes, I was going through a very difficult time, and one of my friends called me. She said, there's a lady who works in sort of a three principles. I think it was Terry Rubinstein. They said, why don't you go see Terry? She's a good friend of mine. Spend some time with her, and I did. And then I spent some time with Charles Rosenblatt. And in such a short space of time, I mean, I was going through probably one of the worst times in my life. I had nothing. I mean, I had my daughters, and life was unbelievably uncertain. We had nothing solid to think about, not even a home that I could say. So that's like the most basic. And I didn't know how I was going to survive this. I mean, I really didn't. And when I came across this, it was so simple. And it came into me through little light bulb moments, but I noticed that organically, like inside, it was all working. So I didn't need to do anything externally because I'd integrated what I'd been told. It seeped into my being and inside. So a little bit like, for example, if I would, at the moment on my laptop, I would download a program, and now the program is kind of downloading and it's all going on in the background. So that's how I felt like my system was downloading with a much better system, with a much more optimized system. But I wasn't even aware that it was doing it, but I noticed a few of the things that I noticed, that my language began to change. So previously, when people used to ask me and say to me, oh, Michelle, God, you're going through such a difficult time. I don't know how you're going to get through this. And they would say, why don't you do this? And I would say, well, I can't, because look at my situation. I began to change, but I didn't even have anything to do with it. I noticed those words coming out of my mouth, and I would say, well, yeah, I want to do this despite my situation. I'm going to totally do this. And my language began to change into, despite what's going on, I'm still going to do what needs to do. I'm still going to be how I need to be, whatever. But the language for me, I mean, I love words. I'm very passionate about words and language, which is why I love writing. And you know, I'm very passionate about it. So one of the first things I notice with clients is how they speak, because normally how they speak and the words that they use is coming from their thought process. And that's very clear for me where it's coming from. So my language began to change, and I began to change, but there was no effort to it. I began to feel whole. I began to feel full of well-being. And what started to happen is that when my clients, who were therapy clients at this time, started to come to me, I couldn't engage much with all the dysfunctions from God knows how long. I was like in a totally different space. And what I noticed was that they got better quickly. It wasn't great for my business, because before, people would stay with me for years as a therapist. I would have clients for years because they felt broken. They felt they needed me. When I began to use the three principles, into my practice with therapy clients, I began to test it on them. Everything changed. They began to feel better. They didn't hang around very long. They were like, I'm good to go. And I'm like, great, go. But what was also interesting for me was that when I had to let go of my own therapist, who I'd been with for 10 years, I could never imagine letting him go, because that's the kind of relationship, you know that well. The relationship that you have with a therapist is very, very connected. I just thought, if I'm not broken, if there's nothing wrong with me, what the hell am I going to therapy for? So I walked into his office, going through the worst time of my life at that time. And I said to him, this is our last session. He was a very quiet guy who didn't speak that much. He almost literally fell off his chair. He said, what do you mean? I'm thinking of putting you up to twice a week. What do you mean you're going to leave? And I said, no, I'm good. Now, here's what was interesting, is that I knew that I was going to be okay. And that was like 5-6 years ago. I knew that I was going to be okay, but he didn't. I trusted that I was good to go. He didn't. He had more of an attachment to me than I actually ended up having to him. And do you know that in that first year when I left therapy, he texted me 3 times to see if I was okay, which really, as a therapist, you don't really do. You don't really run after your clients. But I knew that the moment I drove out of his driveway, I was never going to see him again. I just knew. In a moment, that need, that connection that I had slipped away. The moment I saw, and that's why when people want to make a lot of effort with the principles, try to understand it, try to get it, is just to let it seep in. Let's see what you get out of that conversation. Don't work hard on it. Just go take a walk afterwards. Go take a dog for a walk. Go to the gym. Go swimming. Go do something completely different. And see, observe yourself over the days, like what shifts, because normally they're very, very subtle shifts, but powerful shifts, because subtle and small can be super powerful. We don't have to have these big manifestations or huge Hollywood insights. You don't need to have that. Subtle is great.
I think the other thing that I've noticed, well, two things really. One is that a little while ago, you said when you went through this situation, it was very hard. It was very hard. And now you're talking about when you actually found out about the principles, it suddenly sounds like it got easier.
Yes, totally. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you. I was getting, I was obviously in the middle of a divorce. It was a tough one. This one was a very tough one. And I was in the midst of lawyers, possibly going to court without a secure home. It was, I can't even begin to tell you. What I found myself doing, which again was pretty interesting, was that my lawyer would send me letters that he was about to draft to the other side, and I would sort of amend them. I would say, no, I'm going to amend the grammar. That kind of doesn't fit with me, sorry. And so every part of me became about, you know what, we're going to survive this and we're going to be even better off than we were. And like, it was like everything fell away. There were moments that were difficult. There were moments where I felt a huge sense of loss. Can't even tell you, and it overwhelmed me. And I sat with it, and I was with it rather than running away from it. And I was with it for a few days because it was pretty tough. Because I had lost a substantial, and then it went away. And then I could see what I needed to do next. So, it became, everything became different because my thinking shifted. I didn't take it so seriously. Feelings didn't become monsters about to devour me or to kill me or to run after me, to kind of destroy me. Nobody was out to destroy anybody. It was simply a way of navigating a situation, bouncing back from it, thriving in the best way possible, and then getting back to the life that I wanted to live, rather than becoming a victim of circumstances and spending the rest of my life telling people that I'm not where I am because these things have happened to me, and real shame, isn't it?
So it wasn't actually the circumstances that were making you feel a certain way. It was whatever you were thinking about the circumstances. It was, and then when you changed, when the thought, yeah, okay. So, and the other thing that is that when people are watching this, as you said, it may not be obvious to them what changed, right? So you have said, but it may not be obvious. They might, because people are looking for, well, what do I do, and what can I do, and what, and what we're suggesting is that we don't have to do anything because you already have everything, and the only thing that you said was maybe slowing down a little and not chasing after all of those thoughts. But when people don't necessarily hear in any of these, because there are a whole series of videos, and the reason that there are a whole series of these videos is because, as you said, you just sit and listen and absorb, and you don't try to look for the answer, because it's like trying to remember where you put your keys when you've put your keys down. The more you try to remember, the more you're not going to. It's like just allowing it, knowing that you have that, knowing that you have the connection, knowing that you have the answers already, and just allowing it to seep in, or to bubble out, or whatever way, or to clear, whichever way. So watching each of these, someone might get a bit like you said, when you went to the conference, you didn't know exactly what it was that you heard.
Mm-hmm.
And when you went for a walk afterwards, you suddenly had a different experience. It's like that. You don't have to know what it is that you're learning. And every time when I've watched other things about people talking about the three principles and who have been talking about it for years, and they're like, how do I explain that?
Yes, yeah.
You don't
Well,
have to explain it. It's an experience.
that's right. It's an experience. It's not a concept. It's not prescriptive. It's not tips, 10 tips to get better, 10 tips. It isn't about that. It's about you listening to whichever speaker or, whichever video really resonates with you. And there will be one that will resonate, whether it's this one or another one, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which one. But just be with it and let go of expectation. Let go of expecting something to happen. Just be with it, because on every person, why it's difficult to prescribe in a way is because for every person is going to be very different, because we're all so different. So how I heard the three principles when I first got involved in it, and when I first went to the conference and I had some sessions with a facilitator, how I experienced it was not how somebody else experienced it, or somebody after that experienced it. So because it's so unique, you need to, well, you don't need to, but if you want to listen and see which speaker really, really speaks to you. And you might not even notice any change there. So don't expect anything. Go into this with no expectation whatsoever. But a couple of hours down the line, and this is what happens to my clients, a couple of hours down the line, they're waiting. They're like, what should I do? What should I do? And I'm like, nothing. And then the following week, they come to me and they say, a really weird situation happened a couple of days ago. And I found myself not reacting in a crazy way like I used to. What the hell's happened? So it's not something you need to do. You just need to let it seep in. Like, you just, like when you go for a massage, you let somebody massage you. You don't try and think about it or try and say, well, look, do this, or how am I going to feel? Just let them massage you. Let the by then your pores are open and it seeps in, whatever they're massaging in your body. It's the same thing. Don't expect anything. Do not expect a huge Hollywood firework of an insight or a light bulb moment. Do not. Just be with whatever's occurring. Whatever is occurring in this moment as you're listening to this or other videos is exactly what needs to occur with where you are right now and what you're thinking right now. And whatever it is, it's perfectly as it needs to be.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Michele. That was really a great summary, really. Yeah. Everyone can find all the details about you, how to contact you, all of that on the secretoferything.com website. We have a special page just for you. And so they can have a look through and find your details if they want to contact you, if they want to ask us any questions. If anyone's watching this on the replay, you can ask questions underneath the video.
Oh, great. I'll be checking on those.
And meantime, thank you so much, Michele. That was really lovely. And so,
thank you so much, Anne. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks everybody for watching. Bye for now.
Thank you.